This is Adam Watson.
And Robert Diaz.
You're listening to the Darkslinger Mafia podcast.
What podcasts do you listen to?
Regularly?
Yeah, regularly. What's your favorites? What got you doing it?
I listen to the Comics Alternative quite frequently, which I think that one's also known as two guys with PhDs talking about comics, or that's just their tagline. I don't know if it's actually known as that.
That's way too big of a title.
Yeah, I think that's just their tagline. I listen to that one quite frequently. It's a pretty dry show in a lot of ways, but they have a lot of really good interviews and reviews on stuff that you may otherwise never hear about. So it's a lot of smaller press or bigger small press like Fantagraphics, those type of guys. But it would be stuff that I probably wouldn't otherwise hear anything about. And they actually have like 3 shows in one. So they do like the main one, and then they do a Euro show where they talk about a Euro graphic novel. They have a manga show where they do the same thing, but it's with manga specifically. And then they have a children's show. And then I listen to just kind of random, like, whatever from the Smodcast universe. So I think my favorite one of any of those is actually We Sell Comics with Mike and Ming.
But I haven't listened to that.
I love Fat Man on Batman just because I love hearing Kevin Smith cry.
He loves everything much.
He does.
He was the first podcast that I listened to.
It is amazing to me how much emotion he has, because I feel like I'm the total opposite, where I don't have enough emotion. In terms of what the first one I listened to was, I got invited to be on one back in, I'm going to say, 2008, 2009. That, as horrible as it sounds, I couldn't even tell you what the name of it was now. But I had listened to all of them in preparation for being on the show. So that was like the first one I listened to, and I had no idea what a podcast was until I had been invited to be on one.
They were still relatively new then.
I don't know if they were relatively new, but they were relatively new for like people to consume in mass numbers, you know?
Definitely not like they are today.
Oh, no, definitely not like they were today. But what inspired me to start one, I think more than anything, was just to have a platform to talk about being a comic creator on a weekly basis.
I have no idea what inspired me to start listening to podcasts.
Probably Alex.
You know, hard to say.
Robert's brother.
I had just bought Diablo 3, and
Uh-huh.
I wanted something to listen to. And for some reason, I saw podcasts, and then I was like, I like Kevin Smith movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to listen to Smodcast.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I love Kevin Smith.
his actual
And I enjoy
Smodcast,
most of the
best.
people who are in, like, the Kevin Smith grouping, you know?
Fat Man on Batman is great.
I love Fat Man on Batman.
I love the early ones that he did interviewing people.
I actually started listening to Fat Man on Batman because of the interviews he did.
Yeah, the interviews are fantastic.
Yeah. That's probably why I started listening to podcasts, is because I'll listen to pretty much anything that has an interview with a comic creator. And no matter if they're somebody that I know or not. And so I'd randomly find podcasts on YouTube all the time that were just comic creator interview types. And a few of those, you know, I picked up as something to listen to and still listen to. But those are definitely the two that I listen to the most, are the Comics Alternative and We Sell Comics with Mike and Ming. I like that one a lot because I like to have the retailer perspective. And since, you know, they're comic shop employees, you get a slightly different perspective listening to them than you do people who are making comics, you know, or people who are just comic fans.
Yeah, they're not writing or making them to have a living. They're selling them.
And while they seem to enjoy pretty much everything, or at least Ming does, it's nice to hear them talk about the things that aren't selling well, or things that they think, you know, should be selling better, things like that. Because as a publisher, then you have a place to research. Like, why is this selling the way it is? You know, so on and so forth.
So you're mostly into the podcasts that are interview-based or about comics.
Yes, very definitely.
That's it? You don't listen to other things? You don't stretch out a little bit?
I don't really have time to. I mean, I get like
Fair point.
A half hour to an hour a night that I'm watching TV, where I'm usually doing something else, working on the website, listing stuff on eBay, something like that. I think there's probably only about an hour a week where I'm watching TV that I'm not doing something else. Like, I just listed. But with a podcast, same way. I turn them on when I'm working. Yeah, there's a few here and there that I listen to, but not with any regularity. Like I listen to like the Unsolved Mysteries type podcasts,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and then they have like the stuff on YouTube that's the dark and scary behind this or that.
I like those, or
Yeah, I
the
like those too.
old scary stories or things like that. One of my favorites is Lore, and that's talking about old folklore and how it came to be.
Yeah,
Short
or
little
have you ever
things.
watched the YouTube channel Today I Found Out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that one. Like, I love that one. It can teach me all kinds of stuff that I don't know. It's fantastic. But still, the majority of my time that's spent consuming some form of media is something related to the comics industry.
And it's information.
It's information, yeah.
It's not storytelling. much.
Some of it is.
Well, I guess the interviews and backgrounds, though.
I mean, I personally
stories
don't
within
really
there.
care for Grant Morrison's writing. But have you ever heard the guy give an interview?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. And the whole entire time he's giving an interview, he's telling this big, gigantic story, right? So I wouldn't say that it's not storytelling, because a lot of podcast interviews are telling a story.
Yeah, they're telling their story.
Yeah.
How they got there, how they do stuff,
Yeah.
that sort of
And
thing.
that's the story I'm the most interested in hearing. So,
It tends to be a cooler story.
It is. But it's also,
things.
it's just important to know how people came about. Like, I was talking to Alan Bennett at Black Box Comics last year, asking him which interviews, he seeks out for comic professionals. And it turns out he didn't. So it's like, man, you need to, because, you always talk about wanting to know this guy's influence, yada, yada, yada. And at that time, I was finding pretty much every interview I possibly could on Jim Shooter, right? And if you don't know, Jim Shooter was the editor of Marvel Comics, the editor-in-chief, during like the 80s when Chris Claremont was on the X-Men, and they were doing Epic Comics, which was like Marvel's adult line. He's the guy who's editor-in-chief when they actually went from just being a newsstand distributed company to being both newsstand and direct market to comic shops. He's partially responsible for that because he opened up the ability for shops to order from Marvel without having to use a newsstand agent. And he was one of the founders of Valiant, the first incarnation of Valiant. And so, in my opinion, this is a guy who, if you're trying to break into comics, especially from a business perspective, where, I run my own comic company, this is somebody I better hear everything that I can of what he has to say. So, when I'm working away, as long as I'm not writing, because when I'm writing, I don't like to do anything but write. So if it's anything other than writing, like working on the website, selling stuff on eBay, packaging up stuff that I've sold throughout the day, so on and so forth, I can turn an interview on YouTube, or Spotify has podcasts on it. Can turn that on, plug it in, and just listen to that for the entirety of the time that I'm doing one of those meaningless tasks. Or not meaningless, but you know what I mean, trivial tasks.
Yeah.
Things I've done thousands of times. How about
Things
that?
you don't have to think about.
Things I do not have to think about.
Remedial tasks.
There we go. That's the word I was looking for. But anyway, that's my chance to absorb as much as I possibly can, And I may not ever have an opportunity to sit down at dinner with Jim Shooter and pick his brain about all these things. And so maybe the specific question I want to ask isn't there. But these people have asked enough questions that, you're going to be able to find out an awful lot.
And you can sit there and eat while he talks through your phone.
Exactly. I can do that.
So it's like you're having dinner
That's
with him.
exactly right.
My focus is a bit more broad than that. I listen to a lot more things. I have more time. I just play music or podcasts while I work.
You don't
day.
have kids.
I don't have kids, thankfully.
You work a normal job.
Somewhat normal.
Somewhat normal, but you don't work like 16 hours a day or whatever.
No, that would suck.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
I like stories in mine, and some of them, whether they're made up or not. And that's bringing us towards our focus of the night. Of what podcast are you going to be working on?
Well, obviously, I'm working on the Darkslinger Mafia podcast.
New podcast.
Okay, so a new podcast, and we're not talking about the Kids Review Comics podcast that I'm doing.
How many podcasts are you doing? You just want let's just put that out there.
Okay,
you're doing too much for me to remember.
And we're not including any of those that I'm going to be a special guest on.
Nope.
Okay,
you're not that special.
So the Darkslinger Mafia podcast, which I'm recording with you right now.
Whoa.
Which is right. This one is focused specifically on the ins and outs of Darkslinger Comics. Comics Collaborative with Ben Kreger of Warrior and Keeper Comics. And Kids Review Comics, which started off as just a joke, but it's my kids exactly what it sounds like. They're reviewing comics. So
kids' perspectives are important.
Kids' perspectives are
they're
important.
Always a lot different.
And they're hilarious. Because Tyler, my 8-year-old, he's reading through this old Simpsons comics that he's reviewing. And it's funny with kids because you can try and get them to review something that's brand new. And they won't do it. They want to review something from 30 years ago, right?
Something they've probably never heard of.
Right? And it's like, okay, you can review the comic from 30 years ago because, you know what, people will probably still find it entertaining anyway. But with the review that they're doing, I'm trying to find out 3 key things. What would you rate the art on a scale of 1 to 10? What would you rate the writing on a scale of 10? And would you buy this with your own money? Because that's the most important question for a kid to answer, right? And when I'm asking Tyler these questions, he's holding it up, because he forgets people can't see since it's audio, not visual. And he's pointing at it and he's like, I really don't like the way they drew Bart Simpson right here, so this is a 1. Like, oh wow, that's really harsh. You're only giving the artwork a 1, right? And then he points to the panel right next to it with Homer and he goes, but I really like the way they drew Homer over here, so I'm going to rate it a 10. I'm like, oh, so you're rating the artwork panel to panel. He had a giant issue with the way Bart Simpson was being drawn. I still don't get it because he looked just like he did in the TV show to me. I did not see the difference, but he did. And so, I kind of had to explain to him, I'm looking for an overall rating. What would you give the whole entire thing, right? But anyway, that one is just kind of a fun thing that I'm just doing with my kids because they're really interested in the whole podcast thing we have going on.
So there's 3. Are there more?
There are 3. There is 1 in the works, but I do not want to talk about it yet. I don't want to publicly talk about it yet.
And that's not the one that we are.
No, that's not the one that you're trying desperately hard to lead up to, and I keep blocking you for some reason.
Stop talk blocking me.
Talk blocking.
What your new thing is going to be is something more like the other things that I listen to, and like something that you don't listen to.
That's not totally correct. I do listen to things that are similar to them, and what you were talking about is I'm going to be making 2 old-timey radio shows based off of 2 of my comics.
What 2 comics?
Okay, so the first one I'm going to be releasing is Ghost Assassin Noir, and we can touch on the differences between Ghost Assassin and Ghost Assassin Noir if you want. The second one is a radio play version of Chronicles of Von Helsing.
Taken straight from the comic?
That one, okay, so the Ghost Assassin Noir isn't directly. It's not going to be out of any of the scripts for Ghost Assassin Noir, but the Chronicles of Von Helsing one is.
All right, let's start with Chronicles.
Okay.
Did you say it's going to be like a play? Radio play.
Radio play, like an old-timey radio show, like, did you ever listen to the War of the Worlds broadcast?
I did not.
Okay, have you ever listened to, like, the old Batman and Superman radio programs?
No.
Okay, well,
I haven't listened to old stuff like that.
They're basically radio plays, because you got the voice actors who are, reading all the dialogue, and you have the narrator who, changes scenes. And then you have the special effects sounds in the background, like it's a dark and stormy night.
With
you know.
the piece of metal
Yeah,
rumbling in
yeah.
the back.
They did it very cheaply these days. We just click a button on our phone and it probably makes a sound.
Yeah, probably.
But anyway, they did these, and some of them were really good. They did like Batman and Superman. They did The Shadow. Uh, there were actually quite a few pulp heroes, like The Shadow, who were made into radio dramas, I think is what they actually called them. I believe Little Orphan Annie was one, because that's what they're referencing in A Christmas Story, that Ralphie gets a decoder ring for.
Yeah, I'll just tell you right now, I hate that movie.
How can you hate A Christmas Story?
Because it's just so stupid.
Oh, that movie's great.
And then it's on for 24 hours on like Christmas Eve.
Well, I own it on DVD, so I'm going to watch it for...
So you're going to watch it all year round.
No, I only watch it at Christmas time. That and the Flintstones.
Flintstones Christmas Carol is the
Flintstones
best
Christmas Carol is
Christmas
great.
movie. Anyways, so this is like full on play nearly. If you're gonna have people doing voices.
Yes.
Things.
Yeah. Basically, they're radio plays, radio dramas.
That's neat. I don't listen. Well, I guess I kind of listen to things like that.
There are actually quite a few of them. From like the 20s or 40s that you can hear on the internet if you just go to YouTube.
I never thought about the kinds of stuff that I listen to that they don't. They have some sound effects, or it claims to be a live thing, but it's obviously factitious podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But usually it's like telling the story of it and maybe getting the interviews from the people that were there.
Right.
This is a lot more live theater.
Yes, in ways. But where they used to be a bit more over the top, I am making it more today in that sense, I want it to be more updated with the way the production values work, So
it's like you're taking a classic and you're redoing it.
Yeah, I don't want people to overact, in other words.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the old time radio shows, there is a cheesy element because you do have overacting, but during that time period, pretty much every movie star was overacting too.
It was the times.
Yeah, people hadn't really figured out how to just act like human beings, it seems like, when they were on things.
Yeah. So. Well, that'll be neat because I haven't listened to anything like that.
Okay.
Maybe these fine listeners have. Their ears are better tuned than mine.
Yeah, there are quite a few people who are fans of them, so
could have a good base there, and it's going to go along with the comic.
Okay, so which one are we talking about?
We're still on Chronicles.
We're still on Chronicles. So the Chronicles of Von Helsing one will be an adaptation of the comic. So the basic plan is, and I guess that kind of falls in line with is it Audible that does that?
Audible is books and
yeah, but they turn it into an audio play. Is it not? It may not be Audible then. One of those.
The only thing I've used Audible for is some free. I used free trials to listen. To get audiobooks for free.
In any case, Chronicles of Von Helsing is written in a volume format. Like of all my books, it's very much thought out. Like this storyline comprises this volume. So volume 1 has actually been done for 3 years now. It's been complete. It was complete with the 5th issue. And so those first 5 issues are going to be the first season of the audio drama. And so my basic thoughts is that I'm probably going to be releasing it as an audio drama about 6 months to a year after the release of each volume. So I do have to rewrite them. They don't fit perfectly from the person just reading off the comic or anything like that.
Well, yeah, especially because you get so much more in looking at a comic. You don't need the audio. The
exactly.
Background, a narrator, as it were. The comic narrates itself with pictures.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do anything there. Is that a hard process? Do you have that already started?
I do have that started. Yeah, it is. It's a completely different style of writing, which is actually one of the reasons I wanted to do it, is just because I wanted to see if I could. because I had heard both Neil Gaiman and Stephen King talking about writing for radio versus writing any other type. And Neil Gaiman actually said he enjoyed writing audio dramas more than anything else he wrote. I can't remember what interview he said that, but I'll try to source it in the notes if I can. Hearing them talk about it, I wanted to challenge myself and see if this is something I could do. And I've always been very leery about what I should turn my properties into. You know, it had to be something I'd actually want to see it turned into if I were a reader of my comics. You know, like when you look at Marvel Comics, Wolverine and Hulk are bowling balls. You know? Like, who the fuck cares about that? How many comic fans do you think went to the bowling alley and were like, hey, you know, I gotta have this new Hulk bowling ball? And,
not many people.
Not many people. And, you know, you just see that all over the place. Like, how many different things has Batman been licensed into?
A million.
Millions.
1,000,001.
And in my opinion, that it devalues the property in a certain way when you put it out there in too many different forms that aren't right for the product, you know? But I think Chronicles of Von Helsing and the story I'm telling in Ghost Assassin Noir both really, really work for this format. And it's a format I can get excited about hearing them in. So, you know.
And it'll be a brand new way for people to view the comic.
Yeah.
Almost in a sense, they could kind of read along with Chronicles as you're listening to it.
They could, yeah.
And then that's a whole new perspective, too. They're seeing, because you have to write for what everything is. You're not leaving it as open to interpretation of what everyone else thinks is going on. Because it's always going to be a little different what you see in a comic as opposed to what someone else sees or what the writer meant to get in there.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. I write comics. And people see different things than what you intended all the time.
Everybody sees what they want.
Yes.
So Ghost Assassin now will switch gears.
Okay.
Is it going to be quite different then?
Yes.
Not going to follow the comic.
Ghost Assassin Noir, it's going to be set in the same world as the comic. So Ghost Assassin Noir is different than Ghost Assassin. So Ghost Assassin is a story set, I don't know if I'd say the present, because there are a lot of things I don't use that would indicate the present, like cell phones, so on and so forth. I'm not saying they don't exist in that world. I just don't use them as storytelling devices. But my artists do draw them in occasionally. I think, like, the cover of issue number 3, I think Joel has someone using a cell phone as they're walking past David. But, I try to intentionally keep it kind of vague on what decade we're in when I'm doing my books, you know?
Ambiguous timeline.
Yes. But Ghost Assassin Noir is what I would consider to be like a what if or an Elseworlds type story. And starting with issue number 4 or 5 of Ghost Assassin is going to start appearing as the backup tell in Ghost Assassin. So you're not going to have to buy 2 different books to get it. It's going to be like a full-length story featuring the Ghost Assassin characters you already know and love. There's going to be, you know, anywhere from like 24 to 25 pages, whatever, you know. And then it's going to have a 8 to 10 page backup tell in each issue. It's going to be set in the world of Ghost Assassin Noir. And whereas Ghost Assassin, there's an ambiguity to. Ghost Assassin Noir, there's not. It's set in the kind of fictitious 1920s to 1940s that we see in old pulp movies, you know. Pulp books about detectives, you know, the woman walks in and changes his whole world, and is she the bad guy, is she not the bad guy, you know, that kind of thing. And so in the Ghost Assassin Noir story, it's an alternate version of David and Todd and Melissa. I've dropped Scotty from the cast in Ghost Assassin Noir, but the difference between Ghost Assassin and Ghost Assassin Noir is that everyone in the world of Ghost Assassin Noir can see ghosts. It's not just David.
Quite a big change.
It is. So they're actually like a completely different set of society, so to speak. So
it's like adding in a new race.
It is. And so with the ghosts comes a certain amount of segregation. Like ghosts aren't allowed in certain restaurants, you know, things of this nature. So when ghosts started being able to be seen by everybody, it put an end to the segregation that already would have existed in like the 1940s, because now there was something new for everybody to rally against, you know?
You didn't have to hate what was there. Everybody had something new to hate.
Exactly. And that was my thinking when because at first, the first story I wrote, the ghosts were just living as a normal part of society. Then I was like, wait, this wouldn't be right. Because they're basically like a new version of humans. And the humans would be pissed off and they would, treat them like they've been historically shown to, right?
Are they going to interact in the world the same as a human would? Do they?
Yes. Yeah. So in the first story, David walks into the bar and goes and sits down in the special section for ghosts, where Todd is already seated. And Todd is sitting there drinking Astral Life, which is a drink that only ghosts can drink, right? No one knows what's actually in it.
I like that name.
Yeah, I did too when I came up with it. I do too. Still.
Copyrighted.
Copyright Adam Watson 2017, not to be used or reproduced without my express written permission. Anyway, so...
Just to get that out of the way.
Just to get that out of the way. So, anyway, so the whole thing is that the world became like this about 20 to 40 or so years prior to the story that takes place in the comic, right? And detective agencies have actually become something quite different in this world, because technology has been invented where if a bullet is fired into your brain, it can emit electrical charge that disrupts your neurons and keeps you from becoming a ghost upon death. These bullets are super, super expensive, right? But detective agencies now work as detective/hitman agencies, and they can get special variances to permanently terminate someone's life. Because, the world's getting too populated with everybody sticking around. So this is something the government hands out permits for, right? So this is what Ghost Assassin Agencies, which is what it's called in the Ghost Assassin Noir world, does. So,
this all sounds real cool.
Oh,
this is the first time I'm hearing it.
Oh, you've never heard anything about this one?
No, you haven't told me about it until just now.
Okay. So, yeah, I have this world very, very thought out. I will admit that I have this world more thought out at an earlier stage than what I did with the main Ghost Assassin storyline. So with some of the people that David has to interact with, all that kind of stuff, they have a storyline that began, decades ago, because these people are ghosts or, they're old people at this point or whatever. And so the story that will be told in the old time radio show is of one of the first detective/hitman agencies set in this world. And so some of what's going on in the old time radio show will play off in the comic and vice versa. There will be, back and forth. But I'm not making it to where if you just listen to the show that you have to read the comic, nor if you just read the comic that you have to listen to the show.
Good. I hate it when you have to do so many things to
you'll
get the full
get
story.
more out of it if you listen and read, but it's not required by any means. You're not going to need to do either of those things to understand what's going on. It's just kind of one of those little things like, you watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And there's that nice little scene where Jaime's giving Joffrey the Book of Brothers, right? Spoiler if you are not even remotely caught up on Game of Thrones, because this happened 4 seasons ago. But Joffrey mentions Duncan the Tall, Ser Duncan the Tall, right? And they had done a comic called The Hedge Knight. It was about Ser Duncan the Tall, right? Now, do you need to know that or anything about that guy's story to enjoy that scene in Game of Thrones?
No, I didn't know anything about that.
Of course not. But if you've
recently
already read The Hedge Knight, like I had when I'd seen that scene, like, oh yes, they're mentioning The Hedge Knight in here, right? It's going to be that kind of thing with this show. So as you're reading the comic, you might be like, oh, this was mentioned in the show, or if you're, you read the comic and then you're vice versa.
That's way better than like what these Marvel movies are doing. You gotta watch everything if you want the
Yes.
full story, and then I gotta go and sit and watch 22 episodes of some dumbass TV show.
Right.
I hate that.
I want to watch Doctor Strange very badly, just have not had a chance to yet.
It's
But
fine.
I'm worried because I really, really want to
Man.
go see the third Thor movie in theaters, and I'm worried that I have to, if I don't get around to watching Doctor Strange first, I'm going to be missing out on something, because they are so incestuous, like you're talking about.
I haven't even watched a preview yet, which
Oh,
is
you haven't?
amazing
It looks
for
amazing.
Thor.
But anyway, let's not pimp for them any more than we have to. So
That was more bashing on them from my point of view.
So anyway, no, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not making it so that you have to. And I am going to include advertisement in both for the other. Like, at the end of Ghost Sass Noir in comic book form, I'm going to put a page advertisement that talks about the radio show and how you can, go online and listen to it here, da-da-da. And then at the end of each episode, it will have an advertisement for the comic. So I'm going to advertise both using, cross promotion. But
That's just good business.
But I very much, as I'm writing it, don't want to make it into something that you have to pick up both to understand the storyline. I would hate that if I were a reader or a listener. I'm not going to do that to other people.
So Chronicles, you say, with being a radio show, a play,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have voices for it.
Correct.
People doing that. But is Ghost Assassin going to be like that, or is
Yes.
it just one person reading it?
Nope. There's going to be a primary guy because, it's done in an old pulp style. And to me, the name noir doesn't mean that you just have some guy in a 1920 suit and he's a detective. That's not what being noir means. That's what being pulp means. Because it is noir style and there's no dramatic irony, the main character is the narrator. And he's going to be narrating, so, whoever I pick to be that part is going to have the majority of the speaking. But there will be other characters that are involved in the world that will have to be other actors doing the parts.
This is going to be a lot more work than us just sitting here talking.
Oh, yeah. Of course it will be.
Do you know how big of cast you want to use?
For Chronicles of Von Helsing, there really and truly only needs to be like 4 to 5, and besides that, there's probably going to be a few background scenes where people are screaming, because there's a few scenes where people scream in the comics, or maybe just a little bit of background noise. But you can actually download free background noise online that you can use. Just like free to use stock images, they have free background noise. It's like city, street, whatever, But for the Ghost Assassin story, what I currently have written out would involve 4 different people. So it's not huge cast by any means.
I know which one I'd rather hear.
Okay.
But which one interests you more?
Chronicles of Von Helsing is the one I've had in my head for the longest to do. It was, I've had that in mind for years and years to do that as one. But as soon as I came up with the concept of Ghost Sass Noir, it excited me more. So, I've said before on this podcast that whatever you're currently working on is your favorite. That's true in comics. As far as these two go, I absolutely love the idea of Chronicles of Von Helsing, but I am more excited for the Ghost Assassin Noir.
Ghost Assassin sounds a lot cooler to me. That's the one that I would want to hear first. I don't know which one you're going to work on first. Who knows?
I'm working on the Ghost Assassin Noir one first.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And the Chronicles of Von Helsing, that one probably won't see release until 2018. And, I mean, who knows? They both may not see release until 2018.
We're nearly over.
We're nearly over, but the reality is while it's a lot of work getting everything together and getting it scripted and so on and so forth, this isn't anywhere near as much work as putting together a comic book.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't know. That does seem like a lot.
Yeah, putting together a comic is going to be is an immense amount of work. Putting this together will be an immense amount of work, but it's an immense amount of work that the recording part, at least, you can get done in a couple of days.
Yeah, and it's a shorter thing to do. You know,
yeah.
A comic you're working on for years,
right.
maybe, or.
It would be fantastic if I were able to do the Chronicles of Van Helsing one quicker, because then I could release it around Halloween time, and that'd be really neat with the whole vampire horror element.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not going to rush anything. You know, I want to take my time, make sure everything's done right, everything goes smoothly. You know, people like to listen to it the first time, so that when I put something new up, they'll like to return for it. You know, the Ghost Assassin Noir one will be updated with more seasons more frequently as well, because the Chronicles of Van Helsing relies on having the comics out and having that, you know, season, so to speak, complete, that's taken from the volumes. Whereas Ghost Assassin Noir, you know, since it's a character who doesn't actually even appear in the comic, and the only thing that would keep me from posting anything up is if I do use a character that appears in both and I don't want to reveal him until the comic, you know? But otherwise, I'm free to release as many seasons as I want of it. I'm only constrained by what the budget is that I can put together, you know? So if I want to have it be seasons that are released every 3 months, I can, or whatever, you know?
How many episodes are you thinking right now to make a season?
It really wouldn't make sense for Chronicles of Van Helsing to do any more than 6 episodes for the first season, because the comics that make up the first volume, with the exception of number 5, are pretty thin. You know, they're only 10 to 16 or 12 to 16 page comics. So, you know, I'm gonna have to change up, and some things will be drawn out a little bit to put it into this kind of form. But even with that being said, I don't see them going more than like 6 episodes. I just don't see it.
Either one?
No, the first season for Chronicles of Van Helsing. I don't know about subsequent seasons. But what I currently have done for Ghost Assassin Noir, I believe, will translate to be 10 episodes.
That's pretty good for a season in a podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about similar with what a lot of TV shows seem to be doing these days.
I like that more when you give a lot more into a shorter amount of time.
Yeah.
It just works better.
Yeah, I think so too.
What about time frame on each episode? Are you shooting for like a certain amount of hours?
Yeah.
For a season?
I'm hoping that each season of Ghost Assassin Noir will be about 10 hours. I'd like it if they were 60-minute episodes, even if the 60 minutes includes like advertisement and things like that, you know. I'd like it to clock in at about 60 minutes. That being said, I'm not going to put some crazy amount of advertisement in these just to draw them out. And if something absolutely needs to be in there, I'm not going to cut it out just to make for shorter time.
Yeah, so 60 minutes, I mean, that's near max of what you can kind of ask for from an audience as well. Short attention spans and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And they may end up being like shorter, you know.
I'm
they
might
end up
way.
being like half hour or something like that. I don't really know until I've recorded the first season and edited. Because, you know, what you have envisioned in your head as being said over the course of 10 minutes might realistically take your actors 5, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not a visual way of writing. Like, you know, when I normally write, I get the images in my head and then I kind of break them down into comic panels. When I'm writing like this, you know, it's something someone's actually speaking and everything has to be described. And so, you know, what I think is going to take this amount of time realistically might not, because it won't have the nuances of live acting where, you know, someone has to have a close shot on their face and, then make the really right face for it to work and so on and so forth, It's a completely different kind of acting.
Yeah, you're being a wordsmith.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to have to just record the first season, kind of see what it clocks out to before I guarantee any particular length, So like I said, what I think might go 60 minutes might end up being 30.
Could be. You never know. Like you said, things can talk out really fast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
To what you wrote. Oh, I wrote 5 pages. You just did that in 5 minutes. Well, shit.
Right. Fry.
You don't want that happening.
Yeah. Took me an hour to write. I thought it'd take an hour to read.
Same basic thing.
Yeah.
Like
It
Fry.
totally is.
Like Fry. So you have 2 old-timey radio shows planned for 2 of your comics.
Yeah.
Chronicles and Ghost Assassin Noir.
Right.
Are you planning on doing any others with any of your other properties?
That's fully dependent on how these 2 go and if the property would translate well into it. Because, it's very important to me to only put properties into a medium that makes sense for it to be there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't want something random. You can't do it with just anything.
No, I wouldn't want to do it with El Bovine Muerte, for instance.
No, that wouldn't work. He's much funnier on paper.
Yeah, and if I'm going to take it beyond comics, I prefer to see it in cartoon format, even if it were just like a little 5-minute segment or something.
Or even like a little minute and a half. Like
a minute and a half.
Cyanide and Happiness.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Those
are fun.
I would much rather see El Bovine Muerte translated into something like that than something like this. This Chronicles of Von Helsing will work well for it because it's a horror story. And I think horror stories translate over to radio dramas very well.
They do. I've heard a lot of them on
YouTube, and yeah, they sound great, especially if you're just sitting there with your headphones on. It's like 2 a.m. You've just stepped outside. There's leaves crunching, and you're not sure why. Works super well.
Yeah, or driving down the road when it's nighttime, there's no one around.
Right.
You pop in something horror. It's pretty. It gives you a creepy effect.
Yeah, definitely. And Ghost Assassin Noir, I know will work really well for this because I've listened to so many old time pulp type broadcasts. Like The Shadow and things of that nature, and they translate really well. And so I'm not even remotely worried about that translating well. But for my other properties, it's just going to depend on if I create something that I think would translate well. Who Will Save the World, I actually think not that story that makes up the graphic novel, but like something set in that world would be really cool. So maybe if that were something Stefano was interested in at some point in time, even if it's just as simplistic as you do a series that's like newscasters talking about the day's events as they're happening, something like that could be cool.
Yeah, a newscaster sort of, that point of view.
Right. But as for my other books, like Principalities, I don't think would work well in this style.
No, it doesn't hook me as well as the other stuff.
And so I want to be very, very careful as I move forward into pushing my properties beyond just the printed page into what those mediums are that I enter. So, I've had movie offers in the past that I've turned down because I knew they weren't right for my properties. And I want to maintain that level of discipline moving forward. So even if, these 2 things are tremendously successful, I don't want to push all my properties into it just to have them there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's no point. Just because it's something successful in one area doesn't mean it will be in another.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I do not like the idea of devaluing my IPs. So.
No, that would make the whole thing go downhill on its own.
Right.
If you try to push everything into one thing.
Yeah. And, while this is going to be very enjoyable, or at least I hope it will be, still ultimately where I belong is in comics. So this is a side project to me. Something fun to do that's, related to my comics, that's set in the world of my comics, that helps to push my comics, hopefully, into more hands. Because, if people hear this who have never read the comics, maybe they'll be interested in picking them up and reading them, maybe. But at the end of the day, I want to create comics more than I want to create movies or radio dramas or anything else. And so I wouldn't want to turn everything into a radio drama for that reason as well. I'd rather invest my time and effort into making more comics.
The white whale.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. So, But that being said, this is both a nice break from the standard type of writing I'm doing, doing something different, and just fun, I mean, I'm not doing this because I think it's going to be massively successful. I'm doing this for the fun.
It sounds fun.
Yeah, I think it will be.
I like the idea of a broadcast of it.
Yeah. So far a lot of this has been fun. I didn't know if it was going to be any fun to do podcasts, but so far all of them I've done have been fun.
They always seem fun, sitting around and bullshitting about stuff you want to talk about.
Yeah.
You already do that already.
Right? You're just recording yourself babbling. That's literally all you're doing. But,
we're good at babbling.
Yeah, we're very good at babbling. Not as good as Ben Kreger on my other podcast, though. But, he babbles way more than you. But, so...
Most people do.
I might cut that out, I'm not sure. But, so anyway, yeah. It's just, I want to do other things with the other properties. I'm just not sure what those things are exactly yet.
Broaden your horizons on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, comics may be the first love and your main.
Yes, my main love, always my main love.
But you want to break up the monotony a little bit, and you just want to broaden your horizons. You want to stretch out to other people.
Yeah, and just because you produce something in a medium that's not comics doesn't mean you're, selling out in any fashion either. I have wanted to see action figures of some of my characters from the day I created them. But that doesn't mean I take any offer that was offered to me to make the characters into action figures. It'd have to be the right deal. But I'm kind of off topic at this point.
That's okay.
But it's not selling out, I guess, is my point. So if it's something you always intended to do.
Good point.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. Please tune in next week and every week for another installment of the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can do it through Facebook. I have fan pages for Darkslinger Comics, Ghost Assassin, Chronicles Von Helsing, and El Bovine Muerte. I'll be posting updates on all of those about the old-timey old-timey radio shows as the time comes closer and things are actually being done on it. You can follow me on Instagram, Darkslinger Comics, on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Pinterest. I'm Adam Watson.
I'm Robert Diaz.
Thank you for listening.